Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome to my channel. My name is Sadhana, and this is the third video in a series of videos that I've called Hanged Man decks. And the reason for calling them that is that these are decks that many tarot readers find challenging to read. They tend to challenge your perception with traditional RWS readings, even if you have experience with the Thoth or with the Marseille. Sometimes these decks can really um, kind of throw you for a loop. And today we're going to look at Tarot of the She, which is one of my all-time favorite decks. You are looking at a trimmed copy of the deck. This is by Schiffer Publishing. It is now 10 years old, which I can't believe. I have trimmed off the sides and left the borders on the top and the bottom. This deck does have keywords. And one of the things I do like about this deck is the keywords. I think they're done very, very well. In no way do they distract from reading with this deck. And I actually find they help to inform the readings for the most part. Sometimes I do ignore them. Sometimes I do pay attention to them. So I thought we would start with the Temperance card, which is actually the first card that Emily Carding designed. If you do have the guidebook, you will have heard this story. She began to design a Christmas card one year. She was doing some artwork with her daughter. And so what started as a Christmas card soon took a different direction and became the beginning of this tarot deck that you see that took about a year. I think she said a year and a day to create. You can see this deck is very colorful and the artwork fills in the entire card. And so sometimes that in itself makes the interpretation a little bit difficult to read. So I definitely recommend not throwing too many cards when you're starting with this deck. Also working with a neutral background helps. And if you have a bit of space between the cards too, sometimes that can make it easier to read. You will find in a lot of these cards, there is above and below. There is below the earth, there is above the earth. Sometimes there is within and without, but you're definitely going to see above and below or here and beyond, something like that. The she, the story of the she, if you've read John Matthews' book and his experience, what I imagine was something like you would have here. Did I zoom out too far? Sorry, I'm going to zoom in and out so you can see cards, but I wanted to share with you a bunch of cards all at the same time, and then we'll go back and look at some of them in more detail. What I imagine John's experience was to go somewhere like we have here in this, the suit of fire, the suit of wands is called warrior suit. And here we have an underground entrance to a home. And so he was fortunate enough to be in an archaeological site where the team had found some markings, some sacred markings, and John was shown the great glyph of the she there. And so they, for centuries, longer than that, I have to go back and look at John's book. I have read it and I will pull it out if and when I do a subsequent video on this deck, because I also want to bring in to another video John Matthews' Oracle deck, which focuses on the moon energy and the rocks and the messages that are in the rock carvings on the earth. So in his visitation to this archaeological site, he went underground and he was introduced to the she, to the great glyph of the she, which you do find on all of the major arcana cards. And the idea with that is it is a focus of the energy of the major arcana. And when we go through the majors, we'll look at the placement of the glyph in each of those cards. And so let's begin in the suit of air. Here we have the dreamer. The aces are not called aces. The element is in caps below, and above we have the title of the suit. So here is the dreamer, the warrior, the dancer, and we'll go on and look at the others in a bit. One of the things in this deck I really like to focus on are shapes. There's a lot of mirrored images, repeated shapes, and I find that it really helps in a reading if you can look to the suns and the moons, the peaks and the valleys, the way things are pointing. It really does help, as well as looking to colors, because there's a limited color. While the deck is very bold and saturated, there is a limited color palette. And so you can look to the greens or look to the blues or the oranges, which tend to represent the elements, the four elements. This is just a very mercurial ace of air. I love that we have these wings here. The hilt of the sword is right at the third eye chakra, and it's just about to, it's like it's about to pierce, and that clear thought, that clear sight is about to emerge. And we see this in the 10. So at the end of this suit, we have what I see as a closer up image of this same figure here. And in the ace, the sword is pointing up, and in the 10, the sword is pointing down, and it has pierced the third eye chakra. And all of that wasted thought, unclear energy, there's just this final bleeding, quite literally, from the third eye chakra of all that we no longer need to, that clutter that keeps our mind busy, that disturbs our sleep at night. And so at the end of the suit, I really see this final letting go of thought that no longer serves. It's really quite beautiful. We don't see the wings in the 10 here. Instead, we see two trees that are falling over. But if you look closely, this is indeed um, the same figure that we saw here. There's just little different colorations because the energy of the 10, of course, has gone through the previous cards. Now, one of the things I like to look at in the minors, or at least remind myself, is that all of the minor numbers, so the 2 through the 10 of dreamers, there is some component, there's some energy of that contained in this first card. This first card contains all of this energy. And so if we look at the 2 in isolation, we could look at it as a piece of the ace. Or we could look at these first 5 cards here, or these 4 cards here, as you know, as a fraction of the ace. In this deck, you're going to want to look to the time of day, the time of the month, depending on the moon cycle, as well as the weather to help give you clues into the reading. And if these 2 cards appeared next to each other in a reading, I would also be looking to see if there were other birds in other cards as well too. Here in this 3 of air, we have the heart that has been torn apart by the birds here. There's connections between these cards. So this empty space where the heart has been um, damaged is filled here in the 4. This card is called regeneration. This is card soul loss. One of the things that I've learned through my yogic practices is that the soul resides at the Anahat chakra, at the heart space. This is really very, very clever the way this has been drawn. So a normal 4 of swords, we have the figure lying on the side. And here we see this beautiful kind of rejuvenation, restoration in the dreamer 4, which makes perfect sense, right? Filling up the hole here in the 3. If we go back to the 2, the key word is half moon truce. And there's this, depending on what the surrounding cards are, this could actually represent a time. It could represent like a time of the month where the moon is where we have a first or a last quarter moon. It can also represent dualism, the yin and the yang, the way that the right and the left brain can be in conflict with one another. There's a lot of movement of air in this card, so you're going to want to look across this suit, across the other cards, to see where the weather is turbulent, where the weather is still, because it definitely is going to give you some clues. I'm over here at the side looking at this Dreamer 4, and I love this sacred geometry of the four petals of these rays of light that are coming out. It's very, very well done. In the guidebook, Emily talks about these squiggles, these lines, rays of energy that sometimes appear to be rays of energy, sometimes appear to be wings. Here you can see in the Fool, there's a lot of red energy moving off the Fool here. And so I believe she said to look to the color of it, to look to the intensity of it. I don't think that she, in her visualizations, actually saw wings on the she, that the she do have wings. And this is just the creative license of the deck. Sometimes they are rays of energy, sometimes they look more like wings, and not to get too attached to that. I mentioned shapes and direction. And also, if you're doing a 6 card or a 9 card reading, this deck is excellent for this direction as well, too. So this particular, the Warrior of Fire, the Ace of Fire, is moving up towards the top of the card. We see that directionality up and down in the card in a lot. And over here, I want to put these two beside each other in a moment. You can see the back of the she is here, and then the face is looking down to the earth. We have energy moving up this way as well, too. Look as well to the hands, the energy moving from the hands. I feel like there's this Reiki energy, very strong hands-on healing energy in this deck. A lot of people have asked me if the glyph, the great glyph of the she, is connected to Reiki energy, if it is the same glyph. I don't know. I believe there's always connections with things. It is a little different. It depends on who your Reiki master is and how you learn that. But there's definitely something going on with this glyph, and it's very, very important to the energy of this deck. But we'll get to the majors in a little bit. This 2 here is really quite something. It has a close relationship to the Magician card. So pay attention to this card when it comes up with the Magician. Love the strength, the power of the pose, the energy that's being woven here that appears as dragons. This has Reiki connection. If you've heard my stories about the Reiki dragons that appeared during a ceremony. Anyway, it's another story for another time, but I just really connect deeply to this card. There's so much potential in both of these cards. Here, the potential is bursting forth. You have this kind of volcanic energy underneath the earth. The she is flying up towards the sun. And in here, the she is grounded and starting to use the energy for creative potential, for will, for whatever this she is manifesting. This is an incredible card here. We see this connection. We see the sun. We see the moon cycles. Um, just an absolutely extraordinary card. Warrior 3, these she are working together to either in ceremony to create something. Depends on what the question the querent has, but it's just, there's so much to read in this card. And if we take our time with this deck, look at the connections between the cards, look at where the energy is moving, in what direction it's going, what direction the she are going, it's really easy to unfold a story, to tell a story. I looked at this one briefly already, but you can see that there is a connection between the she below. This perhaps is a marriage. There's some kind of a union that's happening here. So you definitely want to look to this card with the Lover's card. And again, any cards that come up with hands and energy in the hands. So perhaps if these 2 cards came up, you'd want to bring in that connection. The 10 of Fire is another extraordinary card. We see lots of different, not lots, but we see the sun, we see the moon. This is the opposite of this card here. So again, this deck can be used if you're bringing in lunar timings, times of the month, then this, you want to look to these clues as well too. But this card here, we see the arms of the she. The she is, I believe the she is looking down. You may have a different perception here, but the she is the bridge. The she is carrying the weight of the world over this chasm so that the people can walk across from one side to the other. And I just find this metaphor for the Ten of Wands absolutely brilliant. It's just, yeah, the great task is the keyword. Let's look at the few fives here that you can see. Well, you can see two of them right now. The fives in this deck are challenging cards. Hope discarded, 5 of air, dreamer air. Warrior 5 is called action frustrated. I don't actually have all these keywords memorized. Action frustrated. Another thing that helps me in interpreting these cards is to see whether the card is grounded or not. So here we are on the earth, here we are in the clouds. And so that might help you in your interpretation of the reading. This is a pretty simple card to read, but you might be looking at these hands, these arms that are holding these rods here in front. This might end up being a ritual. It could simply be an argument if you want to bring in all that fiery energy. It doesn't look to me like this she is actually on the ground. It looks kind of like he's floating off the ground. But depending on the surrounding cards, it's fun actually to let your imagination go a little bit and to really feel whatever it is you need to feel. The suit of water is called Dancer, and just by glancing here, you can see that it's very watery, lots of lunar energy, big contrast to the fire suit below, the warrior suit below. So here we have divine feminine energy, divine masculine energy, and it's very obvious at a glance when you're looking at the cards. I just noticed we have here rainbow, rainbow. There's not a lot of rainbows in this deck. And it is a symbol that when they do appear, for sure, I want to bring in the rainbow energy. There's so many little details and cool things to look at in this deck. Whether you see this symbol here as as fire, and you want to connect it to perhaps a fire card that is below, or whether you see this fin actually as an inverted cup, and as a water symbol, I believe that's entirely up to you. You may also perhaps see a line through that and feel that that symbol represents the energy of air and the air fueling the water, creating this dynamic movement with the dancer here. It's up to you, and I feel a lot of freedom in intuitively reading this deck. I love the masks that are in the 4. This reminds me of some of the things we were talking about in the previous video in the primordial tarot. I think that's the only card in this deck that has masks, and whenever I see masks, that's just, it's a great opportunity to bring in that metaphor. So let's look at the 10 of water. I'm just going to bring it over here. Whether this card represents family or community or spiritual gathering or something else, it's just full of extraordinary energy. You can see the water down on the bottom here, the rainbow colored water, and then the energy is moving up the card, creating a rainbow in an upward moving direction over the moon. Just so beautiful. And I just noticed here too, this fire symbol here is also reflected in this yellow, this flower that's emerging here. And wouldn't it be cool in a 6 or a 9 card if you had the warrior of fire or another fire card below, kind of moving that energy up. To me, this speaks of a really kind of balanced ace of fire. And remember what Emily said. I'm not sure how much I read to you, but in the minor arcana, we have the thought that initiates the idea. So we started with the suit of dreamers. Then that was fueled by the fire. So this is the will and the creativity. And then here, this is where it gestates. This is where it's going to incubate and grow into something before it settles and manifests in the suit of makers and the suit of earth. And so there are little clues to that connection between the minor suits throughout the deck. And so look for those as well too. Soulmates is the keyword on the Dancer too, a really beautiful card. You can look to the mirrors in the reflections in the fish, the mountains, the stars. Jubilance is the keyword for Dancer 3, 3 of water. And your challenging card in the Dancer suit is Where Loss Resides. We have a ship over here. We have a few boats in this deck. And so I would also look to that as a clue for linking ideas together. And then we move to the suit of Earth, the makers. Now that we have passed through the stages of inspiration, action, and nurturing, it is time to manifest on the material plane. This is the realm of the makers, where real results and physically tangible effects are seen. Makers speak of creative achievements, abundance, or need security and stability. On a mundane level, this may include health, nutrition, career, and financial matters. There's something about the energy of the makers to me that feels um, like a bit of a cautionary tale. You look to the eyes in the Maker 4, and there's something about the eyes in the Maker in the Ace itself. I find a lot more busyness in this suit. This is the most challenging of the 4 suits for me to read in this deck, even though I connect deeply with this particular element. So look to the light again. Look to the light in the background behind the trees. Look to the little clues of the glyphs of the way the energy is moving in the trees, in the tattoos. That can also help to give you some information as well. And again, the weather. So here we have the challenging 5-card Maker 5, which is Winter's Bite, which to me on a positive note just feels like a card of cycles. And so if this were to come up with the 10, for example, the wheel card, it's not a particularly challenging card, but if it were to come up with some other challenging cards, perhaps from the suit of dreamers, then you can go in a completely different direction. This card and this card, so the ace and the 10 that we looked at in the other suits, feels the least connected. So there was something really connected in the previous 3 suits. And I feel like in this one, the progression from the Maker to the Maker 10, a little less obvious. We have a lot that is going on in the Maker 10. And you're going to need to look really, really closely at this card to see the details of who is here and how they're feeling and what they're looking at. And every time you pull these cards in a reading, you may or may not see the life in the tree. The focus might just be on the man in the center. It might be on the woman in the background or the she that's down here in the front with this offering. Right? So here we have a bowl. And if you, I don't know how to say this. Sometimes, if I'm looking at the cards upside down or sideways, or I'm looking at them in a dim light, I see other things that I don't necessarily see. And you might find yourself saying, oh, well, no, that's not what that is. But in that moment, I believe that that's what that needs to be, if that makes sense to you. Like when I was looking here at this particular um, the offering here, I'm just going to turn the card closer to you. Just the way that it's drawn, it almost looks as if the leg of the man could be a fish, and a fish is being offered from that cup, much like in a traditional Page of Pentacles. Just funny little things sometimes that I see. Every time I look at these cards, almost every time, I see little details that I didn't see the time before. And that's okay. We can't unpack these cards all in one go. And I've been working with these for years. And I find them really, really useful for chakra readings when people want to dive into how they're feeling and soul work. Like this is a deck that's really going to help you to peel away these layers if the seeker is ready to go there. I realize this is a lot of cards to look at the same time, but sometimes in looking at a group of cards, we get an overall impression of what's going on. And this is one of the things I like to do when I'm getting to know a deck. One of the impressions that I have with the suit of water is that there's a lot of chaos. The water is it's moving a lot in the early cards. So this is the ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of water. And I've got these ones down below because I've got the majors, the corresponding majors up above with the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here is the majors, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Anyway, my point here is that from the ace through the 6, even in the 7, there's a lot of movement. But then the weather seems to change in the 8, the 9, and the 10. It's almost as if the energy, the emotions become a little more settled. And you can see we have the black and white in the foreground of the Dancer 8, moving into the stability of this solid colors towards the back of the card. I really actually like that 8 of Cups, the escaping stagnation. It's really beautiful. And you can feel the strength and the support in the Make-A-Wish card, the Dancer 9. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why people have such a hard time reading these first 6 cards, is because there's so much going on. There's so much movement, and it's hard when the emotions are so turbulent to settle into finding the language of the interpretation. Again, hands. Hands are really important in this deck. What is this hand reaching for? Is this hand reaching for the card that is up here? Is this hand reaching for an idea? What is this hand reaching for? There's a reaching hand as well here too. So look to the legs, look to the arms, look to the hands. There's a lot of answers there. And this hand, in one particular reading, may be reaching for something. In another reading, it's covering up the mouth, covering up the nose. Why is it covering up the nose and mouth? Is it an exacerbation? Is it in shame? Is there any connection between the Dancer 7 and the Pan card, should that come up in a reading? Is this a card that talks about letting go of expectations? What is creating the delusions? The keyword is illusions depths. So basically in this card, you've sunk to the depths of your delusions. Moving on to the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the final 3 suits. I will move the makers up in a little bit. I'm aware you can't see them here. The 6, Dreamer 6, Warrior 6. Notice the perspective is a little different from a typical RWS, moving towards us instead of away from us. The Dreamer 5, if you recall, let's just have a look at this again. So again, this is a suit of air. Notice how the she here is in the clouds. And this is really important to me when I'm reading, to notice if we're on the ground or in the sky. Sometimes that affects the energy of the message that I'm interpreting. There's a sense of being on top of a tree here, perhaps, or even on the ground. And then there's clouds around here. The boat is in the sky. We've got this breath. We've also got the supportive hand here underneath the boat, which kind of speaks to RWS aces, with the hand. So bring in the energy of the hand whenever you can in this deck, whatever energy that represents for you. I find there are a lot of opportunities to talk about hands in the deck. We have the sun here. The sun has changed energy from the 5 to the 6. Notice also the eclipse over here. So the moon eclipsing the sun, which really intensifies what's going on in this card. I just wanted to show you the 5 and the 6 beside each other. Sometimes that really comes up in a reading for me, and I like to show the client the 5 just to show them where they have come from in the 6. What I wanted to say here was the 7 and the 9 are quite similar. I find they're both kind of frightening. Here, the she are standing up. There's a kind of a frightful looking face here. There's also someone peering around the tree here. So there's a lot of different figures that you could bring into the conversation. Again, try to stay away from your associations with RWS and just let the story start to weave itself. Also notice the concentric lines around the moon here. So we have the energy of the glyph growing in this card. Here we have a spider web. Spider webs are great metaphors to talk to. This she, I believe their head is down, sitting cross-legged, facing towards us. And here we have lots of reflections, lots of mirrors. This is actually a very cool card. Love how this hand is removing the breath. Looks a bit like a Dementor from Harry Potter, removing the soul. But I see this more as the hand is removing the voice that no longer serves. It's also helping to clear the space of the mind. It's quite an awesome card, but very, very intense with the energy of the eclipse. And then we looked at the Dreamer 10 before, and just a reminder of the continuity of the ace through 10 in this particular suit is really, if you can build on it, if you can speak to it in a reading, it does really help. Notice how the sword is facing up in the ace, and then it's down, piercing the third eye in the 10. In the warrior cards, I really like this 7. So very RWS kind of warrior 7. Keyword is a hero's challenge. This is your 8 of fire. We have dragon energy. You can see the wings and the larger dragon in the foreground. And then here, to me, this is really unclear. And sometimes I talk as if this particular she is riding on the larger dragon. Sometimes it looks to me like there's some kind of a reins here and the she is holding on to the smaller dragon. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you see, you see. Also look to that energy of which direction the fire is moving, right? So the fire is going this way. The fire is going this way. The intensity of the sun, the intensity of the moon is really important for me when I'm reading. This is kind of an odd warrior 9. We have a cloak here that is wrapping. It almost looks as if the she is emerging. Sometimes I see a hole here, like this she is emerging through a hole in the ground. Perhaps we have, this is like very, very, I feel a cool energy here. The keyword is guardian. So there's some kind of protection that's going on. We looked at the warrior 10 before with the back body, the back of the shoulders carrying the weight of the people. We have the acknowledgement of the cycles in the card. Look to the intensity of the heat below. So again, in most of the cards, it's really important to look at what is below, what is above, which direction is the fire going, which direction is the light moving, or the wind. The weather is really important. Maker 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, very mild looking cards. I find them a little more challenging to read, and I think I mentioned that before. There is some continuity of story that can build in some of these cards. For example, Maker 6, have a look at the tree here, and Maker 9, it almost looks as if it's the same tree. We don't see the apples in this tree that we do here, but it looks very much like the same tree. We have continuity from the 7 to the 8, the standing stone circle being created here. And in this card, the standing stones are erect. So that works really well. We also have the moon down below, the sun above. So again, above and below, water in this card, water down below, sun above. So look to all of this. Maybe there are mountains in other cards that you want to bring in. The mountains may be speaking to you. Very RWS kind of energy for the maker six. The keyword is generosity, effort sustained for the maker seven. It's a bit more intense than an RWS, but you kind of get that same vibe from this particular card. You see the reward, if you will, from the hard work that happened in the seven. Maker nine is all about the abundance. This is root and blossom. And then we see kingdom prospers. This is a very busy card with many, many details, and you will pick up on some of these details in one reading and then others in another reading. There's several she in this picture facing in different directions. We have a perhaps a leader in the center. And these lines, remember what I said before, represent the energy that is emitting from the she. It could also be interpreted as wings, and the trees also. You can see that the energy that has come to life in the trees. So there's a lot going on in this Maker 10. The court cards for the Tarot of the She are Princess, Prince, Queen, and King. And generally speaking, I find them very easy to read. There's lots of energy, and the poetry in the guidebook is excellent for the court cards. Dreamer Princess. Her leaves are whispers on the wind. She will tell them how and why you sinned. She gleans her knowledge from the earth and dreams of what its gift is worth. You also get a sense of the earthiness in all of the princesses. So if you read with the elemental affinities, you'll notice that in the princesses, there is a sense of earthiness in all of them. So each of the princesses, whether they are the fire princess, the earth princess, or the water princess, have that connection to the earth. And I like the way that is built in to this deck. It makes it really easy to read and helps to connect the cards together. And I really like in these court cards how different aspects of air are so creatively, energetically expressed. This is one card that has come up many times in readings for me, and I get different things from it each time. Sometimes there's a sense of freedom with the birds moving away. Sometimes if it comes up with perhaps the 9 of air or the 7 of air, you can tell the person is in their head. To me, this looks like the eyes are closed and there's inward thinking. This one's called Gift of Liberty. This one is Gift of Reason. And this is Gift of Judgment. And there's so much intensity in this king. I just love this card. Charging away from the full moon on the dragon. This queen to me sometimes is a little bit hard to read. She's sitting, instead of on a throne, she's sitting on her books. And I've never quite figured out what she is holding in her hand. I suppose I could take I've never taken a photo of this card and zoomed in on it. It's probably something I should do to try to figure out what this is that she's so intensely looking at. But generally speaking, I find these courts quite easy to pick up on, depending on what the surrounding energy is in the reading. Dancer Princess. From out of pleasant reverie is born a joyful memory of innocence in childhood play, the simpler dance of yesterday. Her gift is gift of expression. The gift of dance. Really, really beautiful card. The Dancer Prince. This card often reminds me very much, I've got it right here, of the Dreamer 7. That kind of lurking energy. Here we have somebody lurking behind the tree here. At least that's what I see in this card. I just wonder if there was something intended with these two cards. There's a lot of water here, a lot of intensity with the moon energy. And so this she pictured in this card is full of that intensity. I feel a tremendous imbalance in this particular one. Gift of passion may be gone a little too far in one direction. I'm going to read you his poem. The brooding hero of the dance, a poet's spirit of romance, he'll steal the heart that you would keep and lead you darkly to the deep. Dancer Queen is also in the deep, and you see the variety of emotions with the different colors in this card. This one is very cleverly done. And then the Dancer King also has connection to a dragon. So here we have an air dragon. Here's a sea dragon. Gift of wisdom. So the the Dreamer King is gift of judgment, and the Dancer King is gift of wisdom. I really like the fire court cards. There's just something about them that really speaks to me, particularly the princess. I like the fire in her eyes, her connection to the earth, but we also see her fire in the foreground. So much energy in the prince. We also have a reminder of the connection of the queens to the element of water. I don't know if you noticed that in any of the other ones. So we have the water below, the fire above, lots of superpower here. This one feels like a superhero to me. Gift of charm is the keyword, gift of glory here. So you see the energy radiating out in the sky. And then we have the king on his horse underneath that. And then Maker Princess, Maker Prince, Maker Queen, and Maker King. The thing about this suit for me, it's hard for me to express. The other three suits are so full of energy. I just feel like the Maker suit is a little lackluster. I don't know what it is. Usually I really like the Earth suit in a tarot deck. And it's not that I don't like it. It's just that it's not nearly as exciting as the other three suits. The Maker Princess is the deepest jewels of Earth. She knows the art and what it's worth. With Maker's gift, her belly grows. She is both seed and where it sows. Her gift is creativity. The gift of the prince is connection, his connection to the earth itself. And gift of healing is the Maker Queen, and gift of skill, which makes perfect sense, is the Maker King. I'm going to end part one here. And then in part two, we're going to come back and look at the great glyph of the she, go through the major arcana, and then I will pull in some of the courts and some of the minor cards that we've already looked at and hopefully weave this all together with you so you can get a really good picture of the energy of this beautiful tarot deck. Thanks very much for joining me. I look forward to reading your comments below. Namaste.